Meet Reed Lance Rosenthal, rancher, #1 best-selling award-winning author, and unabashedly, unapologetically on the right side of the outstanding issues of our generation. But don't try to fence him in. Sometimes his positions will surprise you, because Reed is definitely his own man, with his own opinions. You might love him, you might hate him, but you won't be able to stop listening. Step over to the right side with Reed.
Howdy, listeners and viewers, coast to coast, Gulf to the 51st state, and around the globe. Reed Lance Rosenthal on the Right Side Radio, and the Cowboys take on all the video channels out there on the planet Earth. Please, if you're listening to this, pass on the links of the shows that you like, and ask those folks to pass on the links. Give us a like, give us a subscribe, and hit that little bell, and you'll know when these shows come out. And speaking about these shows coming out, I'm shooting for Fridays and Mondays or Tuesdays. And you will be seeing this on Saturday afternoon because I'm a tad late, but getting better. So there's hope, folks. There's hope. All right. The other thing is, I was holding off this week. It was a very busy week on the ranch and dealing with some other nonsense, which was just nonsense. But I was waiting for some rulings by the Supreme Court and also some news on the so-called trade wars. And, some of it materialized and some of it did not. And it finally got to the point where I just had to, go with it, if you know what I'm saying. But this will be a fascinating show for you. We're going to explore kind of a combination of the metaphysical and some scientific long-term cycles that have been identified in terms of economics, in terms of social trends, in terms of the rise and fall of empires and countries. And I'm going to try and tie all this in for you because fascinating idea came to me. A very good friend of mine and I were talking about astrology and numerology, and whether you believe in those things or not doesn't really matter. But we were talking about history. We were talking about the fourth turning. That interview, by the way, Adam Taggart and the author of the book Fourth Turning is on the website, on the rightsideradio.com, under the audio bar. Definitely listen to it. It'll give you more context if you have not. I believe it was the show before last. One of the things which kind of piqued my interest in talking about all this, and we're going to get into the details here right after a short rat-a-tat-tat of some of the news matters I was waiting for finally did drop, although in some cases rather disappointingly. I'm going to give you that background. You're going to find it fascinating because there are a number of cycles, a Kondratiev wave, 50-year cycles of major economic changes and movements. There's the fourth turning, which is basically passing the torch from the oldest to the youngest generations, an entire change in social, geopolitical, military, you name it, that happens every 80 years. And there's shorter cycles within all this. And then there's the 120-year cycle. One of the things I kind of piqued my interest is I asked my friend, who happened to mention that Neptune was in Aries. I mean, I'm not a big astrology person, but the last time that happened was a period of conflict and wars and all sorts of stuff. And Neptune is now in Aries again. So I did some research and I went back 400 years, right? That's 5 times 80. That's 5 turnings, fourth turnings, generation, passing the baton to the youngest generation. It is 8 Kondratiev waves, 50-year economic cycles, which are almost irrefutable. I mean, you can go back forever and those cycles exist. And it also tied in with uh, this astrological type of thing, right? So I did a little research, and wow, what I came up with, which I'm going to share with you after the rat-a-tat-tat, is the similarities between 400 years ago and now, obviously without the technology and all that nonsense. The Dutch, the Portuguese, the Spanish, and the English, and the trade wars, and the kinetic wars that were fought over trade, geopolitical influence, and territorial sovereignty. Uh, it's really kind of mind blowing. And I think, once again, an examination of history, particularly where all these cycles that everybody has pretty much agreed do occur, give or take a few years, where they converge 4 centuries ago, right? Which is really the last time that they all converge because you have different numbers in different cycles. Yeah, it's fascinating. I think you'll find it really fascinating. And it's going to be a two-part show because I'm going to cover 1590, the year 1590, through approximately the year 1621 in this show, and then I'm going to cover 1621 through 1650 in the next show, which hopefully will be Monday or Tuesday. And well, if you think about it in the context of today's events, yeah, it will definitely catch your attention. I guarantee you. Uh, let's talk about the ranch story. So, as I told you here, what do I got? I got a collar kind of going crazy here. You know, haven't shaved again, and obviously it's dark out, so I missed the daylight in the other little studio, the normal backdrop. So I'm here, secondary backdrop. And it's been busy, busy, busy with nonsense, and busy, busy, busy with the ranch, and busy, busy, busy with the books. And I haven't had time really to do anything. I really haven't. But I decided I'm going to get this show done tonight, no matter what, even with the secondary backdrop, which actually a lot of people kind of like, and bring it to you, if you know what I'm saying. Bring it to you. And by the way, when I'm sitting at this secondary backdrop, because I don't have all the fancy stuff that I have at the primary studio, I have to wear these earphones, which I don't like much. But that's what brings you clear sound. Okay, that's why I wear them. It's not to keep my ears warm. All right, so let's talk about number one, the ranch story. So the ranch story is kind of funny. I've told you about the dry climate, dry weather we've been having, the cycle that we're in, this whole area of the West, and that we had this saved our bacon, big wet snow, about a week and a half ago, and then a couple of days of rain with 2 or 3 inches of rain. And now the weather forecast is saying that we're going to get 6 inches of rain in the next 9 days. Now, you know, this is the Rockies. Everything is very local specific. Who knows what's going to happen? But we've been running around like madmen getting ready for this apparent, supposed onslaught of water because it'll change the whole picture on what is happening on this ranch all over again and greatly compounded. But I will bring you those stories as it unfolds, if it does unfold, if we can trust our weather people, over the next 6 or 7 days. Let's talk about a founder's quote. I found a great quote, particularly given the nature of the show tonight, which is, a little touchy feely and a whole bunch of science and a lot of history, which will catch your attention. And this quote is Thomas Jefferson. Peace is that glorious moment in history when everybody stands around reloading. Think about that. That quote caught my eye as I was preparing this show. Oh, yes, it did. Let's do a quick rat-a-tat-tat on some current events, okay? Uh, yeah, wow. So supposedly everybody in the United States thinks the trade wars, quote unquote, trade wars, are over. Okay, look, Trump is making progress to the extent that the other countries want him to make progress. You know, they're no friends of Trump. Anything they can do to embarrass him and get the, shall we say, the hawks out of power, you know, the America First hawks, they will do, even though they'll play nicey nice and try to look like they're doing something else, right? It's all psyops. Uh, Trump reached a 90-day trade deal with China, which is temporary, right? At the end of 90 days, we'll see which way the fur flies, so to speak. But nobody's telling you about what the trade deal really was. The trade deal in its simplest form was uh, we or China dropped its tariffs against the United States on some items entirely, but on most items from 125% tariff to 10% tariffs. And the United States dropped its tariffs, once again, not on everything, but on most things, from 145% to 30%. And the two countries have agreed to kind of live within those bounds for the next 90 days. Um, why don't we say that that's rather a tenuous, quote unquote, end to the trade wars? Yeah. It's not an end at all, folks. It's just kind of a step in whose direction or what direction we don't know. That's number one. I think there will be a deal reached with India, which of course is the most populous country on the earth, and a worthy adversary and somewhat, shall we say, skeptical of China nation, and with uh, a lot of manpower, a lot of manufacturing capabilities, which are quickly expanding, and a lot of building wealth. So that is, if that happens, that's really a good deal for the United States, and I believe for India. Um, the the economy in the United States, everybody, because they think the trade wars are over, the trade wars, is suddenly ebullient. I mean, ecstatic. You know, I've been listening to all this crap. Oh, the stock market's going to go to new highs and blah, 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 blah. It's risk on and, you know, don't sell and la di da. Look, you can do whatever you want. Okay. I'm not your financial advisors. I guarantee you I'm not. But I will tell you that everything that goes up comes down. Okay. There's very few exceptions. And some of those exceptions are hard assets. And hard assets also go up and they also come down, but not to the extent of soft paper assets like stocks and bonds. And oh, yes, fiat currency. You know, the Western world's actually the entire planet's fiat currency. Uh, you can do whatever you wish, and you can certainly, more power to you, ride this market with your one finger kind of trembling over the ejector button to blow out. But understand that we are in a very volatile and uncertain time. This will tie right into this, like the history of 400 years ago. Yeah, you know, when all these cycles converged. And it's going to be a roller coaster, no matter what you decide to do with your money, with your investments, with your financial planning, with your family, with your properties. So I'm just going to throw out that kind of word of caution so that you can kind of think about it. The economics in the United States, although everybody is going, oh, you know, inflation is down and this and that. Look, realgovernmentstatistics.com. You might want to visit that site. I've told you about it before. It'll give you the real scoop. This is the unadulterated, unmitigated, unmanipulated scoop on unemployment, money supply, inflation. Why don't we just say the government's numbers kind of a carryover from Obama's third term, or maybe from forever, are massaged. I'll put it that way, massaged. And they are 9 times out of 10 dramatically adjusted when nobody's looking months after the original statistics came out. I think you're familiar with that. So the New York Manufacturing Activity Index, uh, this is the third month in a row it has contracted. It went down 1.1. That's a pretty big drop to a 9.2 overall negative on the index, right? 50% is 50-50. 51% manufacturing, manufacturing is expanding. Under 50, manufacturing is coming down. Well, it's now 9.2 negative after the last 3 months. This ties in with the other manufacturing region statistics, which I brought to you over the last several weeks, and there'll be more coming your way. Worrisome is, although not the mainstream media, because they don't want to make Trump look good for anything, but a lot of people are talking about the fact inflation is down. The CPI report that came out this past week was, 0.1% below what everybody expected. So this was great, and the market took off and whatever. Holy smokes. However, materials, folks, the materials that are used to build stuff, to manufacture stuff, to create stuff are up 8% over the last 60 days. That's 8%. Okay. And weekly hours worked, which have been dropping now for a whole bunch of weeks, continued to drop this week. In other words, people aren't losing their jobs. Everybody's crowing about how unemployment, is staying stable and employment is increasing. But no, I've already told you in previous shows that the increase in jobs is masked by the fact that the great majority of these jobs that are increasing are just people taking a second job or now a third job. So the same person, 3 jobs, if they got 2 of them in the last several weeks, guess what? It counts as 2 new jobs, but it's not, is it? No, not even close. Employers instead, because everything is so uncertain. I mean, if they knew things were going to go to hell, they'd lay off people. If they knew things were going to expand, they'd hire people. But they don't know what's going on. So they're trying to keep the people that they have, the trained staff that they have, but they're decreasing the number of hours that people work each week. And this is the umpteenth week in a row now, over the last 2 months, that weekly worked hours have gone down, which means what? The consumer has less money. At the same time that materials costs, which underlay the stuff they're buying, is going up. And this is not a great recipe. Not a great recipe. I am absolutely shocked to tell you that the Republicans, I mean, wow, the big, beautiful bill, Trump's big, beautiful bill, I don't agree with everything in it, but it's certainly a huge step in the right direction, and particularly the tax aspect. Otherwise, we're going to have the largest $4.2 trillion. We're going to go back to the taxes before the Trump tax cut in his first term. I mean, they sunset this year. I've been warning you about that. That's a $4.2 trillion tax increase. This is not a population. This is not a middle class, what's left of it. And this is not a country that can sustain that kind of financial wallop right now. Although those in government would love to have it because, they spend your money so wisely. Well, it seems that after like 11 different committees worked on this bill, got it all put together, and Johnson, who I'm not a big fan of, had planned for a vote by Memorial Day. That's May 30th. What do I have? A wheel sticking up here? I did, although I didn't have time to shave. I did kind of put on a clean shirt for you. So there you go. I don't have mud-spattered ranch stuff on. Johnson wanted to have a vote on the big, beautiful bill by the 30th of May. It's very important that this got done quickly. In fact, it would have helped if it was done prior to the tariff announcement, Liberation Day, but it didn't get done. And now a number of Republicans in the last committee that needed to pass to go to the floor for a vote decided that they weren't going to support it. Now, a lot of these Republicans I really like. Chip Roy from Texas, as one of them. And they are fiscal hawks. And they are very upset that there was a bunch of games, in their estimation, played within the bill. For instance, changes to Medicaid. and the changes are minuscule. It's like you have to prove that you're working, and you have to be out of work for a certain amount of time before you can do Medicaid. I mean, it's really kind of just, some polishes around the edges. But the change in the work requirements for Medicaid were, this is a 2025 bill, were put off in the bill to be effective not until 2029 or 2020. Yes, 2029, the year after the next election. I mean, wow, how obvious can you be? Well, the fiscal hawks have said no more of these games. Get it together. Let's do the cuts. Let's make them happen. And we're not going to, hold our breath for something to happen 4 years from now when we may not even be in power anymore. So, the big, beautiful bill was killed in the last committee. It didn't even get to the floor. And everybody's scrambling now. They've already made a concession to the fiscal hawks that the Medicaid changes are going to be moved up to next year or the year after, but they won't be waiting until 2029, and other negotiations are in process. In the meantime, the Senate, the Republicans in the Senate, have already told the House, oh, there's some things we don't like in your bill, so we're going to have to work on that. So, folks, Congress is just pathetic. And I don't mean just the House. I mean, everybody is pathetic. And the Democrats vote en masse, in block. It doesn't matter how bad it is for the country, how bad it is for Americans, how anti-constitutional the concept is. They just vote in block. They're like lemmings. The Democrats are lemmings, and the Republicans are a bunch of hens running around a chicken house. It's really mind-blowing. I'll just leave it at that. It's really mind-blowing. You would think that they could get this bill passed and then go back maybe and have a second bill. I mean, yes, I realize there's some restrictions with reconciliation in the Senate, the requirements for that, but wow, that's all I can say. You need to write your congressman, wherever you are, wherever you're listening to me, and you need to say, look, cut the BS, get the damn thing voted on, and get it to the Senate. Wow, that's all I can say. It's just wow. All right. And then, of course, we have Comey, the former director of the FBI, Obama's boy. The guy behind at least 3 of the 4 illegal, absolutely unconstitutional FISA warrants, and the guy who, shall we say, developed and institutionalized, along with illegal leaks to media like the New York Times, the Russia hoax, right? That guy. The guy who let Hillary off the hook. You remember that press conference? This guy is a treasonous snake. And I'm actually being kind in describing him that way. And then he gets off the hook. Anyway, Mr. Comey made a post on one of the social media sites. And it was a JPEG of seashells. He must have been vacationing at the beach with his pension that we're paying for. And the seashells spelled out very clearly the letters 8647. Well, 86, folks, in mob talk is offing somebody, killing somebody. Let's 86 them. That's what it means. And 47 is, oh, let me see. Oh, that's right, the 47th president of the United States. So Mr. Comey just kind of arranged the seashells in 8647 and posted it. Well, other people caught the significance of that too, including Pam Bondi at the Justice Department and Tulsi Gabbard at National Security. And Tulsi Gabbard has now called for his arrest and trial for inciting violence against the president. And you know what? I really hope that occurs. I hope they throw the book at him. In fact, a rope would be perfect. Save us from feeding him and appease the fiscal hawks in Congress so they can get the bill done, you know? All right. That, folks, is the end of rat-a-tat-tat. Now let's talk about the really big picture thing, right? This really incredible kind of confluence of events and confluence of cycles. So number one, you have the Kondratiev wave. This is a 50-year cycle proven of economic conditions, the ebb and flow of economic conditions. And then you have, on the more metaphysical realm, Mercury in retrograde, which is a periodic thing throughout each year, at which time contracts shouldn't be signed, things go awry. I mean, you've heard about Mercury in retrograde. But it also has Mars in Leo. Excuse me, it wasn't Aries. I'm not an astrologer. Mars in Leo, which are two fire signs. The last time that happened was roughly 400 years ago. And it was a time of upheaval, a time of the fourth turning, a time of the Kondratiev wave way back when, and other astrological and metaphysical convergences. And I'm about to tell you what some of those convergences are. And then you have Neptune in Aries, which also happened only 400 years ago, right? It's a really, really rare astrological event. It's really fascinating. So all these astrological things, these metaphysical forces, energies, whether you believe in them or not, all meshed in really rare instances in that period around 1600, give or take a few years. So did the Kondratiev wave. So did five fourth turnings ago. And wait till I tell you what was happening then. And as I give you these little historical dots, and we're, like I said, we're only covering 1590 to 1620-ish today. And in the next show, I'm going to cover 1620 to 1650. You will see that there were huge advances in science. There was unrelenting war. There were trade wars. In fact, there were kinetic wars fought over trade and trade influence and territorial. It was a period where the Asian countries were up against the Western countries, the Western countries exploiting the Asian countries trying to fight back. It was a period where Japan embarked on and began its deep enmity with China. It was a period where empires were crumbling and empires were rising. The Portuguese were going down, the Dutch were ascending and in power, kind of as the new world power, and the British were up and coming and pushing on the Dutch. It's really, really fascinating, let me tell you. All right, let's get started on that. In 1591, Ivan the Terrible, right? The Russian Empire. He had been dead for 4 years. Fyodor is still the Tsar, but he was incompetent. That's right, he had dementia. Does this sound vaguely familiar to you? And another of his sons a 9-year-old by the name of Dmitri was the heir to the throne, but had his throat cut. And the psyops of the day was that he had done it to himself in an epileptic fit. Anyway, that sparked a revolution in Russia. More on that to come. In 1591 and 1592, and if I pronounce these names, I'm so sorry to my friends over there in Japan. Toyotomi Hideyoshi begins his rule of all of Japan. Up to that time, it was a bunch of kind of conflicting feudal kingdoms. And he turns his attention to conquests abroad. Japanese want to expand their territorial influence, their power, and their ability to gain natural resources. Oh, gee, where have we heard that before? So he thinks his armies are invincible, and he sees them conquering the rest of the world, not just Asia. And he wants to begin with China by way of Korea. And you wonder where China and Japan became enemies? Okay. In 1592, Pope Clement VIII. Think about the anti-Semitism that seems to be rearing its head over the last 5 to 10 years, particularly, and certainly right now with all the Hamas things and the Palestinian things and Iran, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Here was the quote from Pope Clemente. Quote, "All the world suffers from the usury of the Jews, their monopolies and deceit. They have brought many unfortunate peoples into a state of poverty, especially farmers, working class people, and the very poor." Unquote. Another rhyme with history and and in this case the fourth turning, right? The passing of the baton from the oldest generation to the younger generations, and a complete upheaval and change in geopolitics, social mores, philosophies, inventions, right? We have AI now. Wait till you hear what was going on back then. In Italy, Galileo develops the first thermometer. Huge invention, right? An English actor and writer, you've probably heard of him, William Shakespeare, begins to write plays. Interesting. In 1600, the Italian philosopher Giordano Bruno, who was a freethinker, I mean, believed in freedom, individual rights, individual sovereignty, you know, the individual stronger than the state. Well, he was burned at the stake. Oh, a little bit of intolerance there by the state? Nothing like today, right? No, no, no. And Queen Elizabeth of England charters the British East India Company to compete with the Dutch East Indian Company to, shall we say, flex their muscles, opposing muscles, in trade around the globe. Uh, Pretty interesting, huh? And it's based on the trade of nutmeg from the Banda Islands. That's what started it all off. Yeah. Remember the show I brought you, I think, a show or two ago on tariffs and the history of tariffs? It's really fascinating, boy. Really fascinating. In 1601, the Portuguese, who had been the preeminent power up to about this time, began to falter. Indolent court, a squander of wealth. They allowed their military to degrade. Anything sound familiar here? The Dutch defeat the Portuguese in a naval battle in the Indonesian archipelago. archipelago. That's the Spice Islands. Okay. In 1602, Shah Abbas of Iran drives the Portuguese from Bahrain. In 1602, the Dutch government, which was the United Netherlands at that time, grants the Dutch East India Company, the rival to the British East India Company, a monopoly to pursue trade in Asia. In 1605, there's a lot of upheaval in England right now, and a lot of upheaval in England 400 years ago. In fact, in 1605, there was a plot by extremist Catholics to blow up the Parliament building. The perpetrators are caught, they're hanged. Obviously, Parliament was not blown up. British advisors help the Iranian army, at that time the Persian army, defeat the Ottoman army, right, of a greater size. In 1607, a London company sends 3 ships in a small group to what is now the state of Virginia. And in the spring, on an island in the river, a settlement is founded named after King James. That's right, Jamestown. In 1607, the Dutch defeat a Spanish fleet. The Spanish had had their heyday back in the 1400s and early 1500s. The Portuguese kind of kicked their butt, and this was like the end of the Spanish Empire, that Dutch defeat of the Spanish at Gibraltar, right? You've heard of Gibraltar. And then in 1609, Henry Hudson was employed by the Dutch East India Company. I don't know if you knew that or not. Henry Hudson was a Dutchman. He anchors off Manhattan Island and trades with the local Indians, and then sails up the river that's now named for him, the Hudson River, to look for a waterway to the east. In 1609, the Dutch have ended Portugal's domination of the Indian Ocean, and the Dutch established their first trading outpost on the western coast of India. You've seen those old movies, all the English influence in India. Well, that comes on the heels of the Dutch, right? As England supplanted the Dutch as the empire of the globe. Interesting. There's a Jesuit priest in 1609, Matteo Ricci, and he finds in China an attitude which actually astounds him in this puritanical age. And that was that homosexuality in China was at that time not illegal, and people were not reluctant to talk about it at all. 400 years ago. Well, here we are today. In 1611, Galileo, which is rather amazing, Galileo exhibits the wonders of the telescope to the Vatican, and he tries to convince people that the Earth revolves around the sun, not vice versa. He's unsuccessful. This will later almost do him in, okay? Because you don't want to have you don't want to go against the deep state, even back then. Yeah. In 1611, the Dutch East India Company builds a factory, the first factory, on India's coast in the southeast of Pulicat to make gunpowder. That's right. Remember Thomas Jefferson's quote? Peace is simply when people stand around and reload. We got it. Then the English kind of kicked some Portuguese butt in the Indian Ocean. This is right after the Dutch defeating Portugal, defeating them in a naval battle off the western coast of India. Here we go. England and Dutch in India. Surat. The first barrels of cured tobacco, right? Think about the trade now, America to the rest of the world, reach England from the colony of Virginia, 1614. In 1614, the Japanese shogun Tokugawa, that's what they were called at that time, shogun. You remember the book Shogun? He outlaws Christianity. Boy, that's not happening anywhere. Oh, that's right, it is happening everywhere. Huh. Wow. Amazing how all this stuff rhymes. 1616, there's a Dutch sea captain. He's blown off course in a huge storm. His name is Dirk Hartog, and he discovers Australia. In 1617, the shogun, back there in Japan, has been succeeded by his son, and he establishes a district. Listen to this. If this doesn't rhyme with today, a district for hedonistic impulses, which are outside the shogun's code of Confucian conduct. And the district provides theater, musical, sexual entertainment, all sorts of stuff to anybody who can afford it. Kind of like an Epstein Island, isn't it? In 1618, King Ferdinand II, and he's a pious Catholic Habsburg, okay, part of the Habsburg family. He closes Protestant churches in Prague. The Protestants rebel. And siding with Ferdinand are Maximilian, the Catholic the monarch of Bavaria, and Philip III, King of Spain. Siding with the Protestants are German princes, and it begins what's known as the 30 Years' War in Europe. I wonder how long the war in Ukraine will be going on. Just saying. In 1619, the forces of the Dutch East India Company conquered the city of Jayakarta and rename it Batavia, which is Latin for Netherlands, by the way. And they make it their capital in the Spice Islands. Think about all the interplay that's going on right now, folks, between China, Japan, Singapore, the Philippines, the United States, how everybody is, China is building islands off atolls. America is beefing up all its island protectorates, right? Philippines, Diego Garcia, etc. You really can't make this stuff up. It's pretty amazing. Oh, 1619. African slaves, here we go. African slaves are being transported to the West Indies, not by Americans, folks, not by the American colonies, but by the Europeans, to replace Africans who've died in slave labor in the sugar industry in the West Indies. Basically, the sugar industry, which is brutal, as are the West Indies, was killing slaves faster than they could reproduce. This was a problem for the Europeans. And then in 1619, seeing what was happening there across the ocean, to work their tobacco fields, right? The folks in Virginia bought 20 black folks from a Dutch ship that arrived for supplies. Very interesting. And of course, the 1619 Project, New York Times, and the Obamas, and the rest of the nuts. This is where that comes from. According to them, that was the beginning of the United States. Not the war, not the revolution, none of that stuff, no. 1620, England develops the slide rule. By the way, a huge invention. It allowed you to do intense and complicated transactions 100 times faster than handwriting all the transactions out. It was kind of the computer of the day. Not quite the cell phone of the day, but the computer of the day. And the next 10 years will also blow your mind. So in 1621, in Prague, 26 noblemen are executed. And other nobles that have rebelled against Ferdinand II, right? No, no, no. You better not get out of line. There's only one rule of law here, folks, and it's our interpretation of the law at the time. Kind of like Biden's FBI, so to speak, or Obama's FBI. Guess what they did with these nobles, besides executing most of them? Took all their land, that's right, forfeiture, and they gave it away to their friends and their buddies. In 1621, the Pilgrims in Massachusetts Pilgrims of Massachusetts have a meal with the chieftain, the Indian chieftain, Massasoit, and 90 of his warriors. And the pilgrims have been struggling to survive, and the Indians have been helping. They're thankful. And the day is celebrated from henceforth, 1621, as Thanksgiving Day. In 1623, in cooperation with the British East India Company, Shah of Iran, leader of Persia, expels the Portuguese. I mean, the Portuguese are on their last foot as an empire. From the island of Hormuz, you've heard that, right? The Persian Gulf. Wow, it's amazing, right? 400 years ago, we're talking about Hormuz. Unbelievable. 1624, Dutch established a fur trading post, Fort Orange, what today is Albany, New York. Okay. In 1624, in China, the Ming Emperor at that time has allowed a eunuch. Let's talk about let's talk about the last head of HHS. You know, the he or the she or whatever, admiral, whatever, or the other folks that inhabited the Obama's third term, that administration. You know, DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And this eunuch is granted incredible power. Uh, in fact, the eunuch is allowed to basically, shall we say, get rid of anybody anywhere in the government or anywhere in any provincial or feudal government that the central government can control, to just kind of poof, they're gone. Yeah, kind of interesting. Kind of interesting. And one of the folks that were getting persecuted there in China at this time were the Confucianists, which are kind of the constitutionalists right now in the United States. You know, they're the old kind of stable status quo. This is the rule of law, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, pretty interesting. 1625, King of Denmark, who happens to be a Lutheran. Right? There's a whole sort of interplay during this time period, just like today, right? Christian, Muslim, et cetera, uh, this whole religious interplay that was underlying all these tensions and all these competitions on the trade, on the moral, on the geopolitical, on the territorial, and within countries themselves. It's pretty fascinating. In 1626, using fishhooks and trinkets, in fact, valued today in today's dollars terms, historians estimated $26, today's value. With fishhooks and trinkets, the Dutch buy Manhattan Island from the Canarsie chiefs of the Wappinger Confederacy. 26 bucks, Manhattan Island. In 1628, William Harvey says all the ancient writers' theories have been used in medical practices for, at that time, a millennia. He says, BS. This is all wrong. And we need to base things on science, not wishes, not emotions. This is the guy who discovered this is a period of great revelation, particularly in the medical field. Blood circulation. That's right. In 1629, Holy Roman Empire. Anybody who spoke against the government, anybody who spoke, shall we say, against the edicts of those in power or the beliefs of those in power were burned at the stake. Hundreds, maybe thousands, were burned at the stake. Very interesting. So you can see just through this little shot, this 30 years that we looked at, we're going to look at the next 20 here in the next show, which are just as fascinating, if not more fascinating. You can see the rise and fall of empires. You can see shifts in world domination and world power. You can see a multipolar world, right? You had the Portuguese, you had the end of the Spanish, the very end. You had the beginnings of the end and the end of the Portuguese. You had the Dutch and you had the English. A multipolar world. Wow, that kind of sounds like today, doesn't it? You bet. You had trade kind of exploding, but in a very competitive way, and kinetically competitive. I mean, there were lots of wars, lots of naval battles fought over trade and ports and all sorts of things. And you see the mores, the morals of society changing. The Catholics, the Lutherans, the Confucianists, the Mings. It's really uncanny, at least in my opinion. I mean, it's really uncanny. So, in a few days, I'm going to bring you the next 20 years, which will blow your mind when you see those similarities. I mean, this 30 years I brought you to today or tonight. This is just kind of the warm up to the intersection of the fourth turning, the astrological, like, once every 400-year crossings of this, that, and the other, the Kondratiev wave of economies. Yeah, it's pretty fascinating. And what happens in the next 20 years is all predicated on what I just brought you in the first 30. Because all these things take time to play out, right? This is not everything converges and everything changes in a heartbeat. It's kind of, and this is a famous saying, it's very slowly and then all at once. All right. Hopefully some food for thought and some interesting historical tidbits for you. This is Reed Lance Rosenthal on the Right Side Radio and the Cowboys Take. Remember that subscribe, like, bell, blah, 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 blah. Really appreciate it. Pass on the link. And we will talk to you in a few days. Keep the wind at your back.
Please remember, if you've missed any shows, just click on Show Archive and you'll find all of his shows. We look forward to seeing you here again next week for another episode of Reed Lance Rosenthal on the Right Side.